So welcome everyone. My name is Eli Hamilton. I'm going to be talking at you for a while this evening for this community forum around the City of Mountain View's homelessness response strategy and expenditure plan. Our goals from this meeting are very specific. We want to use this time to share information with the community about the city's current efforts to respond to homelessness. We also want to use this time to share information about this current project, the development of a homelessness response strategy and expenditure plan. And we really want to hear from you all as community members about your experiences and your priorities around homelessness in Mountain View. So we have 3 goals, and we're hoping we've designed a meeting that will accomplish all of them. To do that, we are going to do some welcomes, some introductions, which is where we are now. And then I'm going to be presenting some information because one of our goals for this time is to share that information with you. So I'm going to be presenting some information, some beautiful slides, because we love a slide, about homelessness in Mountain View and the city's role in the response. We are going to be offering you a break today because we are all human beings and breaks are important. And after the break, we're going to be coming back to be doing some small group conversations. That's the portion of the evening where we really want to hear from you all as community members. And so we hope that you all stick around for those breakout groups and give us all of your thoughts. And in the end, we will have a closing portion, a wrap up, where the facilitators for each of those breakout groups will share out the themes that they heard, and we'll also cover the next steps for this process. Okay, so I want to check in about who is here today. And to do that, we're going to use a couple of different tools. So one option that we really encourage you all to use if you can is Mentimeter. Mentimeter is it's a lot of fun. I'm a huge nerd, but I like graphs, and it'll allow us to get some information about who's in the room in a visual way. So if you're able, if you're on a computer, on a separate browser window, or on your phone, if you have a smartphone that has connection, you can get onto www.menti.com, enter that code, and it will take you to this Mentimeter poll and set of questions. If you are not able to get onto Mentimeter, because we know that not everyone necessarily has a separate browser window on a laptop or a phone with internet connection, you can absolutely respond to these questions in any way you like in the chat, and we will also be tracking the chat there. The goal of this part of the evening is just for us to get to know who's in the room and for you all to appreciate and love the diversity of your community and to see which of your neighbors are here with you today. So first question, we'd love to hear from you all. What are your connection or connections to the City of Mountain View? You have a bunch of options if you're in the Mentimeter poll. You can respond in multiple ways if you like. Do you rent a home in Mountain View? Do you own a home? Do you provide services? Are you unhoused in Mountain View? A business? Your kids or you go to school in Mountain View? And thank you, Jan, in the chat, giving an example of how you could participate in the chat if you're not able to get into Mentimeter. We'll give folks a little more time to get in.
Could you show again this code for Mentimeter?
Absolutely. There's the code for you.
6238120. 8120.
All right. Thanks. And Carla also put it in the chat. Appreciate that, Carla. So we can see we have a lot of folks here, and yeah, thank you so much, Carla, in the chat. We have different experiences and different connections to Mountain View in the room here. We have folks who provide services. We have folks who work in the city or own a business. We have folks who own or rent in the city, and seeing other folks in the chat who live and work in Mountain View. Give a little more time for folks to get on and answer. And awesome. Thanks so much. So our next question is just a simple question. And this is one that don't feel pressured to respond to this in the chat, or if you feel more comfortable, you can chat me directly and I can sort of give a sense of who we have in the room. But this is a relatively common experience, especially in the Bay Area, to have been unhoused or have experienced housing instability in your life. So I just want to check in with the room to see what range of experience we have. And again, no pressure to check in on this one in the chat. Okay. Thanks, folks, for participating there. Okay. And next question. This is one where you're going to see your answers popping up. We're going to do a bit of a word cloud. So the more a response shows up, the larger that word will be, but it will give us, again, a picture of the diversity of the community that we have here in the room with us. So how do you identify your culture, your race, your country of origin, whatever answer is most relevant to you? Thank you all so much for sharing. This is, and again, a little bit nerdy, a little bit childlike, but I just love watching the colorful words show up and move. So we're seeing, like, again, this is a moment to see, to recognize, to embrace all of the folks, all of your neighbors who are here today. And just, as I said, the amazing diversity of human experience in the city of Mountain View. Last question we have for you today. What is your favorite time of year in Mountain View? When do you like being here? Okay. And for this one, if you are on Mentimeter, you should be able to just click with your mouse or with your finger, depending on what you're using, on one of these months, just anywhere on that image, and it should pop you on a little dot, or you can respond in the chat. Think at our in-person community forum, which was last week, we had a lot of fall, if I remember correctly, and we had a lot of spring. Seeing some December. Some May and April. Lovely. All right. Well, thank you so much for checking in with us with those questions and warming up a little bit before I switch to presentation mode. So this is the portion of the evening where we're using this time to share information that we think will be interesting to you all as residents and folks who work and play in the city of Mountain View. And also that is relevant. It will be good background for the breakout sessions that we're going to be having. So it's important to acknowledge that the experience of homelessness is one that has grown, it has increased in the country, in the nation, in recent years, in California, and in the broader community of the county of Santa Clara. It's also an experience that I am sure all of you, as folks who are connected with the city of Mountain View in various ways, have seen in your community and have seen the impacts of. It's also really important to acknowledge that the experience of homelessness in a community, particularly within the Bay Area, where we have cities and neighborhoods that are connected to each other, right? We don't have broad expanses of geography separating our cities. We have cities that are fairly closely connected to each other, run into each other, and that there's a lot of movement of people, and there's a lot of coordination across a lot of different areas of our lives. And so in this community, a regional response to homelessness is really important. So we want to acknowledge that the regional nature of homelessness as an experience and as a challenge, and the regional nature of a response. So all of these partners and more that are on the screen have their own very important and in many ways unique roles to play in a response to homelessness. The County of Santa Clara is a huge partner in this regional response. As a traditional and historical owner of things like the social safety net, public benefits, behavioral health care, medical care. Local cities also have their own important and unique role. And we're going to be talking about the role of cities on a couple of future slides. There's also great work by community-based organizations who have their own niche and skills of providing direct services, first responders, volunteers, and advocates. And we also recognize that all community members have a role in a response to homelessness. It's not the same role, because we know that business owners and employees don't have the skills to be social workers, and that's not what they should be expected to do. Community-based organizations hire social workers in order to play that role. So everybody's role in this response is unique and ideally is tied to the skills and the reasonable expectations that we can have of those folks. First responders don't provide ongoing support and case management in the way that a community-based organization might. So just calling out that this is a multifaceted response to a large and in many ways complex issue. Oops. So in the regional response to homelessness within Santa Clara County, we know that there are countywide systems and resources in place that are every day providing support to folks who are experiencing homelessness and experiencing housing stability. There is a countywide community plan to end homelessness that represents coordination and collaboration across county departments, across cities, across service providers, and represents a community-wide roadmap. There are systems like the homelessness prevention system, which is across the county and a coordinated system targeted to people who are at risk of becoming unhoused. There's a coordinated entry system that offers that coordinated sort of centralized way for anybody across the county to access the supportive housing resources that are available. There's Valley Homeless Healthcare. There's the Santa Clara Housing Authority, Dignity on Wheels as a hygiene and hygiene support service that operates across the county. There are county safety net programs like benefits programs, the child welfare system. There are so many countywide systems and resources in place. And we're calling this out because it's important to sort of put ourselves within, it's important to not try to reinvent the wheel. And it's important to recognize the work and the context in which we're doing this kind of planning and identifying of strategies. It's also important to help us hone in on what are the actionable, implementable, and useful things that the city of Mountain View can identify as part of its role within this larger regional response. So when we think about the role of cities, we think about the scope that a city has the most control, the best tools, and the most experience. So historically, we think of things like local land use, our basic sort of city services like garbage and recycling, library services, parks and rec. We think of the deep knowledge of local needs. There's a huge connection, usually with cities, to their residents, understanding what is needed and desired in a city, and a role of coordination. So we see cities as a key sort of partner and collaborator within a region, within a community, with the county, and with community-based organizations. Some of the challenges that cities face, that this is a regional issue, and the city of Mountain View has resources and scope of authority within the city of Mountain View, and a lot less ability to impact what goes on outside of the city borders. Cities have limited access to state and federal funding compared to some other units of government, compared to counties in some instances, so that it is, there's a smaller pool of resources in some cases for cities to pull from. And cities aren't structured or funded to provide some of the key services and resources that we know are so important in this response to homelessness. So things like behavioral health care, right? That's not traditionally within the scope of the services that cities provide to their residents. There are also sometimes legal restrictions to what cities can and can't do, particularly in terms of things like land use, but also the types of restrictions that cities can place on where people are, where they can park and live and be. There are a lot of legal protections and restrictions that limit those things. So again, important to highlight the context that we're working in and that we're planning within. And in particular, because this process is focused on the city of Mountain View, we want to recognize the scope and the challenges that the city faces. We also want to recognize that the city of Mountain View is doing currently a lot of work within its scope to address homelessness and to meet the needs of its residents and its constituents. So we're going to go over a little bit of background on some of that work, and then we're going to go into detail on work that's happening right now. So way back in 2015, the council approved funding for a rental assistance program to support folks who were struggling to be able to pay for housing. That was followed by the adoption of the Community Stabilization and Fair Rent Act by voters of the city of Mountain View in 2016, which is squarely in that land use and sort of housing protections area that cities are so strong in. The council did not only endorsed the Santa Clara County Community Plan to End Homelessness, but the city was supportive of the process of creating that plan, and were sort of vital in that process. In 2021, after the council endorsed that community-wide plan, they adopted this strategy creation, the homelessness response strategy, as a priority within their work plan, sort of looking at, okay, we believe that this community plan to end homelessness is important, and now we want to figure out what is our role, what is our unique position where we can be most useful, and that's what this process is. The city also engages in ongoing coordination and is very focused on the development of an affordable housing pipeline. So we're going to dig into some of the details there. In terms of affordable housing, we see the city of Mountain View recently providing support and funding along with the county to convert the Crestview Hotel into 48 affordable apartments for youth who are aging out of foster care, which is can be a very vulnerable and destabilizing time for those youth. The city of Mountain View also provides funding for 200 units of permanent housing for folks who are exiting homelessness in Mountain View. So that's folks who are returning to housing after being unhoused through either permanent supportive housing, which is a more long-term support, and then also through rapid rehousing, which is a time-limited support for folks who don't need that permanent assistance. City of Mountain View provides funding for case management, currently in the city, there are about, give or take, in the realm of 1,700 affordable units, meaning units that are deed restricted, to affordable rent levels, and another 1,650, so another 1,650 affordable units in the pipeline. So almost double the number of current units in the pipeline. And this is where this is one of the most exciting things that we talk about with City of Mountain View for me personally, because I love the idea of supporting folks to be able to pay their rent by and to prevent evictions through just cause eviction protections and rent control. So the city currently has about 12,700 fully covered rent controlled units, and then about 1,676 units that are covered by just cause eviction protections. And add to that over 1,000 rent protected mobile homes, which can be a really important source of affordable housing in a community. The city also supports services for folks in terms of safe parking, interim housing, and shelter to provide people a safe and secure place to be when they're unhoused. So the 2019 Safe Parking Ordinance allowed for the creation of a safe parking program supported by both the city and county that provides up to 114 safe parking places for people to park across 5 locations. The Life Moves Mountain View interim housing provides 100 units, 88 for individuals, 12 for families, that support up to 100 households with a safe place to live while they're finding a more permanent situation. And the city also provides funding for Graduate House and Quetzal House, other transitional housing and youth shelters in the community. In addition to those direct investments, the city hosts a monthly coordination call among many community-based organizations and other partners. So this is the city stepping into a role of coordination, as I mentioned on previous slide, between regional partners. And this coordination call is focused on services being provided and available to folks in the city of Mountain View who are unhoused. This coordination call is, I think, another great opportunity for the city, where the city is having a big impact to allow those community-based organizations that are all supporting the same group of people and the same populations to connect. Okay. And other services and resources. So there are portable restrooms and hand washing stations available 24/7 at CSA and Hope's Corner based on city funding. City provides funding for housing-focused case management through CSA. The Mountain View's Police Department Community Outreach conducts proactive outreach to people experiencing homelessness, and we've heard from providers and community members that this is one of the really impactful strategy and resource. And Elevate Mountain View is a project or a resource that provides direct cash payments of $500 a month to a set of extremely low income residents to help address that core challenge, which is a lack of resources, a lack of income, a lack of money, which is something we all rely on. So that is the sharing of information about the city's role and the city's response to homelessness in Mountain View. And as I've said a couple of times, the reason that background we find so important is we're going to be asking you, well, what do you think, what would you like to see the city consider in terms of additional strategies? So it's helpful to know what's already going on. Now I'm going to get into what we're trying to accomplish with this meeting and with this process. So the homelessness response strategy and expenditure plan that we're working with the city to develop is meant to be a coordinated strategy that listens to community needs and compares that to available resources and figures out a way to most effectively increase housing options, promote access to housing and services, ensure that there's a positive, livable quality of life for all residents in the city, and really to hone in on and emphasize that local and regional coordination component that is so important, as I said, especially in Santa Clara County, especially in Bay Area communities. Our approach to developing this homelessness response strategy and expenditure plan combines what we call community or stakeholder engagement. This is part of that. This is us coming to you all as folks who are connected to the city and saying, what are you seeing as the needs? And what do you think the city should consider in order to meet those needs? We are combining that with an analysis of local service data. So we are doing data analysis, and we're specifically looking at data around people who have a connection to the city of Mountain View who have experienced homelessness. The goal is to combine these sources of information and use that to help identify city-specific strategies. So again, really focused on where can the city, with its tools and its strengths, identify like implementable action steps that will make an impact, that will be meaningful. And in addition to that, an analysis of available funding. That is a core piece of any plan that's going to be implementable, is to analyze where the resources are going to come from. And the outcome of this hopefully will be a homelessness response strategy and expenditure plan that provides a strong roadmap for city action that's specific to the city's strengths and role, and can be a supportive part of this regional response. Currently, we are in the phase of collecting community and stakeholder input and starting to use that input to identify those strong, feasible, implementable strategies. In the summer of this year, there will be a study session with the City Council in order to obtain feedback from the City Council on the draft strategy. This is also a public meeting and an opportunity for additional community input in this process. And then in fall 2024, the goal is to present the homelessness response strategy to the City Council for final adoption by the Council. So the last bit of presenting and me talking at you that we're going to have is around homelessness in Mountain View, looking at data. So this, I'm going to talk through the data on this graph, or on this slide. But the big takeaway from this slide is this does not give us numbers of people experiencing homelessness. It's not data specifically about people experiencing homelessness, but it helps us answer the question, with all of the resources and all of the energy and the great work going into preventing and ending homelessness, why do we still see our community members unhoused? And one of the reasons is economic. We can see that in the city of Mountain View, this is very similar to most Bay Area communities, but in the city of Mountain View, about 60% of Mountain View households are renters, folks of households who are housed. About 60% are renters. And of that 60% of renters, about 37% are in a category that we call rent burdened. Rent burdened means a household pays between 30 and 50% of their gross income toward housing. Or severely rent burdened means renters that are paying 50% or more of their gross income towards housing. So you put those two together, rent burdened and severely rent burdened. Everybody who is spending over 30% of their income on housing, it's 37% of all renters in the city of Mountain View. As I said, this is very comparable to what we see in most communities in the Bay Area, where we have fairly high housing costs, high costs of living, and for many people, incomes that have not kept up with those high housing costs. And we also see from data that's collected every other year across the county, we see that on a single night, in this case in January of 2023, approximately 562 individuals were experiencing homelessness in Mountain View. And based on this count, about 75% of those households, of those people, were staying outside in tents, in vehicles, or in other places not meant to be lived in. This is what federally the Department of Housing and Urban Development identifies and defines as unsheltered homelessness. Folks who haven't had access or aren't in shelter, aren't in interim housing. This also aligns with what we see in other Bay Area communities, and it aligns with what we see across the state of California.